Okay, good morning, everyone. We'll probably give about one more minute to see if there are any others that are going to be joining us. I know we're expecting 45 and we're actually at 44. So we should be pretty close. Okay, well, let's get started. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Rental Assistance Cohort 2 of the Adult Reentry Grant. This is your grantee orientation. I want to start by thanking you all for taking time to join us for these next couple of days. We are excited to learn more about your projects. We want to welcome you to the ARG team, and we're so happy that you have gotten your awards. And we want to extend a very hearty congratulations to you for being able to fall in line in that next list. We know many of you were not even expecting this opportunity to show up, and here you are, right? So congratulations on being ready to receive the opportunity when it unexpectedly fell in your lap. And thank you for making the time to make the adjustments to whatever your original proposals were and making sure that you're able to continue to bring this great work into the community. We will be starting today, and we'll start with our agenda. All right, so the agenda before you today is an overview of our day-to-day. We're going to hear from 3 projects. If you remember, we had in your email, you were asked to have a brief 3 to 5 minute presentation. Everyone would share share your project name, introduce your team, and give us a quick summary of your project and what you guys are going to be doing. So we'll have you do that. We'll have 3 projects present today. And I hope you all are ready, because you will be called in random order. No one knows what day they're speaking, so everyone has to be ready at any moment. We are going to talk a little bit about the BSCC and a little overview of ARG. And we'll hear, of course, from the grantees. And then I'll share a little bit with you about some of the administrative responsibilities that you'll have for this project. And then we will hear from the dazzling Helene Zentner, who will share principles of effective intervention with you today. So we'll start with a few housekeeping tidbits. First of all, I do want to say, please make sure that your name on Zoom has both your first and last name, so that we will be able to reference you appropriately, and others will be able to identify you as well. Please remember to keep yourself muted if you are not actively talking to us. And please keep your cameras on. If you have camera access, we do ask that you keep your cameras on today. We really want to support engagement and interaction, especially since we don't have the privilege of actually being in person together. This is the closest we're going to get to meeting each other, seeing each other, and having any level of interaction and communication. So if you could keep your cameras on today, we would really, really appreciate it. I do want to make sure that you know that there are no breaks built into the schedule. So please make sure to take care of yourself as you see fit throughout the morning. We will be together till right around noon. So make sure if you need to stop, get water, use the restroom, please feel free. Make sure you take care of that. The last housekeeping tidbit I wanted to make sure you knew about was we do have a virtual binder that is currently under construction that will contain all of the resources that you will need, that we'll be covering over this week. So the PowerPoints, any documentation that we need to share with you, things like that will be in this virtual binder that'll be available to you in about a week, and we'll post it up on the website. We'll send you the link once that's up and ready for you, but we do want you to know that that will be available, as will the recordings from this orientation. All right, so let's start with some introductions of to the BSCC and the ARG team. First, I want to start with Ricardo Goodridge, our Deputy Director. I see Ricardo on. Is there something you'd like to share?
Yes, good morning, everyone. And again, just congratulations on this fantastic opportunity. We're so excited to have an additional round of funding going out to the community, and know that you will be great stewards of it. And just congratulations and welcome aboard.
Thank you. Is Katie on by chance, Ricardo? Do you know if she was going to join us today?
Not as of yet.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. So let me introduce you to our ARG team. Let's start with Veronica Silva. Veronica is our most senior analyst on the team, and she's provided a substantial amount of work behind the scenes on this project, getting ready for today. She will be the primary analyst you all will be working with. Veronica, are you on with us so far?
I am. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Adriana Regalado has only been with the team a short while. She joined us in May, I think, but she's quickly adapted to her role, and she's made herself a valuable addition to the team. Adriana?
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Again, as everybody else has been saying, congratulations on your grant award.
Awesome. And last but certainly not least, Danielle Feist is the newest addition to the team, having joined maybe just about a month or so ago. But she's also demonstrated amazing adaptability and is proving herself to be a valuable asset as well. Danielle.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm using a new headset, so.
Good sound, Danielle. Thank you.
Trying to cancel out all the background noise.
All right, Rosa Pargas. She is the Staff Services Manager, and she supervises the Program Analyst. Is Rosa on today?
Good morning. I am on today.
Awesome. Thank you.
My role with the grant team is to supervise the work of the analyst and to provide any support needed to the team.
Awesome. Thank you, Rosa. Ashley Garibaldi is our research data specialist. She works with the ARG team. I do not think she's on, but just in case, Ashley, are you here? Yeah, I didn't think she was going to be able to join us today, but Ashley is the one that assists with any data aspects of the work. And then there's me, Tanya Hill. I am your assigned field rep. I am also pretty new to the BSCC. I joined the agency right at the start of the pandemic in March. So it's been an honor to learn alongside you and to really jump in and learn all the amazing things that you're doing. We also have, again, the amazing Helene Zittner, who is going to be providing your training today on the principles of effective intervention. Helene, would you like to say good morning?
Good morning. Congratulations, everyone. I can't wait to hear more about your projects over the next couple days.
Thanks, Helene. And I'd also like to give a shout out to some other folks that are giving us some support along the way. Our IT folks, Matt Gutierrez and Sean Moore, will be supporting this effort for the next few days. And a hearty thanks to the rest of the BSCC team that may or may not be on this call. I know the field rep team has been amazing. The analyst teams have been great. Our support teams, I mean, it's just been an amazing effort. So that is your BSCC and ARG team. And now we want to hear from some of you. So for our first presentation, grantee presentation, I would like to call on Life Moves. You're up first.
Oh, I am ready. I had a question.
Just
So Life Moves,
about it.
what we'd ask you to do is to share your project name, introduce your team members that are on the call, include their names and their roles, briefly describe your project focus, and share with us one thing you guys are looking forward to most about your project.
Okay, well, good morning, everybody. My name is Jacqueline Ramirez. I'm the Director of Housing and Employment at Life Moves, and that plays the project director role in this program. So this program is our reentry program, is what we refer to it internally at our agency. Joining me this morning are just a few of the key people from our awesome reentry team at Life Moves. From our finance team, we have Michelle Ogata. She's our finance director. We also have Yan Huang, our staff accountant. She'll be responsible for kind of the day-to-day finances on this program. And then from our programs team, we have Christina Cortez. She's our reentry program lead and a case manager. And we also have Franco Avila, our Associate Program Director of Employment Services, joining us. Normally, we will also have Bernadine Posadas. She's a Program Director for our Housing Support Services, but she's out on maternity leave right now, but she'll normally be part of the team as well. So Life Moves decided to go after, let me tell you a little bit about Life Moves. So Life Moves is the largest shelter provider in Silicon Valley, which is Santa Clara and San Mateo counties in Northern California. We operate 24 shelter and service sites, including our newest 121 bed shelter in Mountain View, which is the home of Google, for those of you that aren't familiar with Mountain View. And that's actually under construction right now. It was part of the Project Home Key awards that went out this year in response to COVID. So we hope to have the doors open there in late January, early March, early 2021. Life Moves model leverages 3 integrated programs designed for long-term success. Our model is personalized holistically to serve the broad needs of our diverse client population, which includes veterans, families, single adults, the LGBTQ+ community, aging seniors, and now, thanks to the BSCC grant, formerly incarcerated individuals will be getting some targeted attention. The 3 integrated programs are residential services, supportive services, and community outreach. So the BSCC grant has allowed us to develop targeted reentry services under our supportive services program. So over the course of the 29-month grant period, we hope to assist 140 formerly incarcerated individuals exit our shelters to stable housing by providing that holistic program of supportive services. So in addition to the intensive case management that folks receive while in our shelters, our reentry population will now also be able to get targeted services in the areas of housing navigation, case management, employment services, and then for those that the case management will be for those that qualify for the tiered rental subsidy, which is being made possible through the BSCC Rental Assistance Grant. So Life Moves decided to pay some targeted attention to this population because I think it was early 2019 where we partner with Palo Alto University to help analyze our data and make sure that we are providing the most effective services possible to our clients. And upon analyzing some of our data, they found that formerly incarcerated individuals were 24% less likely to exit to stable housing from our shelters. And then those that were on parole, the ones that were on parole or probation were 24% less likely to exit shelter to stable housing. And then clients who reported any type of prior incarceration were 50% less likely to exit shelter to stable housing. So we knew that we needed to pay some attention and show some extra love to this population because we want all of our clients to be successful. So I think the thing that we're most looking forward to, in addition to just learning about all of your programs and collaborating where possible, is just being able to see the clients that are not experiencing successful exits from our shelters get that extra support and exit homelessness.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. That's an amazing feat that you all are undertaking, and I am excited to watch that progress over the course of the next several months or couple of years. So looking forward to seeing how those outcomes come out. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll start in today with a little bit about the BSCC. The BSCC was established by Senate Bill 92 in 2012. But we've been around since somewhere in the 1900s. We were formerly known as the Board of Corrections, and then after that, the Correction Standard and Authority. And today, as of 2012, we are now known as the Board of State and Community Corrections. So that's a little bit about our history. Our agency charge, our real efforts are to provide statewide leadership to the adult and juvenile criminal justice systems. We focus on an expertise on public safety realignment issues, and we also provide technical assistance on a wide range of community corrections issues while promoting effective partnerships with law enforcement, community-based organizations, and other state, city, county governments as well. Who we are made up of a 13-member board that governs our work. Policy for the BSCC is set by that 13-member board, and those members of the board are prescribed by statute, appointed by the governor and the legislature, and they're subject to approval by the state senate. The board chair is appointed by the governor and reports directly to the governor. The other members of the board include some advocates from the field. We have one judge, and then we have representatives from probation, law enforcement, and CDCR. In order to actually do the work of the BSCC, we've been divided into 5 different divisions. We have the County Facilities Construction Unit, or CFC. And that division is responsible for overseeing financing programs for construction projects to facilitate the renovation or new construction of local adult and juvenile facilities. We also have the Facilities Standards and Operations Division, or FSO, and they're responsible for inspections of both adult and juvenile facilities. They establish standards and regulations for the safe and effective operation of those facilities. And they also provide some technical assistance to those facilities as needed. We have the Standards and Training for Corrections Unit, or STC. And they're primarily responsible for establishing the minimum selection and training standards for corrections officers and other corrections professionals. They develop training curricula and provide program support and technical assistance to local correction systems. They also do some compliance monitoring with those established standards. We also have the Research Unit, or our Admin, Research, and Program Unit. And they are our most coveted partners, and their work is very critical to every aspect of our operation, as they're the unit that is responsible for data collection and reporting. The Research Unit manages the creation of the scoring rubrics and evaluation factors that you saw in your RFP process. And we have other major functions such as IT, accounting, and critical program support staff are housed within that unit. And then, of course, there is the Corrections Planning and Grant Programs Division. That's us, the CPGP unit. And this is where we do our work of grant management. We oversee fair and equitable distribution of hundreds of millions of dollars for adult and juvenile criminal justice programs that are administered by both state and federal governments. We collaborate with grantees to provide technical assistance and general oversight in support of their grant projects. So a little bit about some of the other grant projects that we offer. We do, as an agency, we do have both state and federal grants. We have on the federal side, the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant, known as the JAG grant. We have the Residential Substance Abuse Treatment Grant, or the RSET grant. We have Title II formula grants with tribal youth and Reducing Racial and Ethnic Disparities grant. On the state side, we have the Youth Reinvestment Grant, Tribal Youth Diversion, the Adult Reentry Grant, which you all are a part of, Prop 47, CalVIP, or the California Violence Intervention and Prevention Grant, Proud Parenting, Pay for Success, and Prop 64, which is managed by Helene Vintner. So a little bit about the project that you are now intimately connected to, the Adult Reentry Grant Program. The ARG was established in the Budget Act of 2018 with the sole purpose of providing reentry services to people formerly incarcerated in state prison. The Budget Act of 2018 originally allocated $50 million for that effort, and it was divided into 3 pots of money. We had the rental assistance component, the rehabilitation of existing property and building components, and the warm handoff for reentry services component. At that initial breakdown, $25 million went to rental assistance, $15 million went to rehab, and $9.3 million went to warm handoff. The Budget Act of 2019 appropriated an additional $32,950,000, which was divided $40.6 million for rental, $25 million for warm handoff. And the 2020 appropriation allocated another $37 million, and those funds were allocated as such. So $17,575,000 for rental assistance, which is the pot of money that you all have been awarded, $17,575,000 for warm handoff, which is now under a competitive bid process. We just hosted the bidders conference for that on Friday. And then $1.85 million was awarded or is allocated for administrative costs for the BSCC to report on program outcomes. So since its inception, the Adult Reentry Grant has been able to fund 23 CBOs to date, to include those of you on this call today, with a total of $58,226,250 to provide rental assistance services to the community. We've been able to support 53 CBOs to date with a total of $25,001,250 to provide warm handoff services. And we have awarded 1 CBO, the sole applicant for the rehabilitation property, the total $5 million to do that work. Eligible activities, as you guys are launching your projects, just a quick reminder that the statutory language that authorized ARG did not specify specific types of services to be funded. However, in creation of the RFP, the Executive Steering Committee did place a priority on certain types of services that lead to permanent housing and provide critical time intervention that meets the immediate needs of those returning to the community. These examples on the screen are just that, examples. That list is not exhaustive. But they are offered as suggestions only. We are relying on you all as the providers in the community to identify programs that best meet the needs of the community that you serve. The adult reentry grant funds, as a reminder, may not be used for the acquisition of real property. So make sure that you're clear. You cannot buy property with these funds. And if you need additional information on eligible or ineligible costs, please be sure to refer to the BSCC Grant Administration Guide, which is on the website. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later on as well. All right, are there any questions so far? Any questions in the chat, or if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask away.
There's no questions in the chat.
Okay. All right. Well, seeing that there are no questions, let's move to the next grantee presentation. Up next is, drum roll please, Brilliant Corners. Woo!
Woo! That's good morning. So my name is Morgan Chandler. I am the program manager with Breaking Barriers. Breaking Barriers is a program within Brilliant Corners, which is a statewide agency. So Brilliant Corners actually provides housing services, case management services, any supportive services to a variety of populations within all of California, essentially. So we're in the Bay Area, we're also in LA County, we're in the IE, we're all across California. So let's see. We have today our statewide case manager, Lisa Johnson. We have our finance team, we have Ivy, we have Andrew, and we have Renee. So please welcome them as well. We have an amazing finance team, which will help oversee this grant project for the next 2.5 years. I'm very excited to be here as well. So our specific project is Breaking Barriers. So we are actually located within Los Angeles. So we provide case management services to individuals who are on felony probation, essentially. So we provide intensive case management services, employment services, as well as housing stability services. So we are a collaborative program, and we really pride ourselves in providing services for families, single adults, all within who are above the age of 18. So let's see. This specific project will be able to, excuse me, not feeling that well this morning. So we'll be able to provide services to individuals. Hold on, give me like 2 seconds. So we'll be able to provide services to about 80 to 100 individuals who have been touched with the state prison population. So we're very, very excited about that. We are essentially fully staffed for this project. We are just working with our referral pipelines to tighten up our referral process and our criteria, but we essentially are ready to go for this project. Very excited to have this grant and to be a part of this partnership. So thank you all, and excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Morgan. Excited to see all the great things that are going to be coming out of Brilliant Corners. It sounds like you guys are hard at work and ready to rock and roll. So looking forward to seeing what you guys produce for us going forward. Okay. Now we're going to move into a brief section we will call administrative responsibilities. And this is where we're going to talk about some of the key things that are necessary for the whole project to go, what our expectations are of you. You know, of course, we've, granted, excuse me, a few $1 million for your project. So of course, we will have some expectations on how those funds are expended, and we have some responsibility to make sure that you guys are, meeting up to your proposal standards and things like that. So some of the things that administratively we will be expecting and looking for, and we'll talk about some of those key topics. The key things we'll talk about are communication. We'll take a quick look at your grant agreement, a couple of things within the grant agreement that we want to just kind of point out or highlight. Non-governmental organization assurances, and we'll talk about that. You should remember that a little bit from your application process. The importance of prior approvals, and then a little bit about the grant administration guide. So the first thing I want to share, the two most important communication tools so that we can make sure we stay in good contact are going to be the grantee contact information sheet and your payee data record. We ask that you keep these current and up to date so that, one, we always know who to communicate with. That's what we'll get from your grantee contact information sheet. And the payee data record, make sure that we can get your money to you. So if you change your address or anything like that changes, make sure that you get us an updated copy of your payee data record. On the contact information sheet, there are 4 key roles that we require you to share with us, and that is your project director, your day-to-day program contact, your financial officer, and your day-to-day fiscal contact. We do ask that between those 4 roles, those are the 4 roles or the 4 people that we will add to our email distribution list. We do ask that as an organization, we'll send it to those 4 key roles. And if you need that information to go to others within your organization, that you will forward it out as necessary and appropriate. We will be sending information for, our project director calls and different things like that. If there's anything that you want to invite others on your team to participate in, you are usually more than welcome to do so. But again, we just ask that you send that information out, because these are the key people that we will add to the list. And I will say we will also add that number 7 line, the additional project contacts. We can add them to the distribution list as well. Another key reminder here, as you are identifying those key roles, please remember that your project director and financial officer must be employees of the grantee, so they must be employees of your specific grantee organization. The other thing to remember with your project director and financial officer is they cannot be the same person. So your project director cannot also be serving as the financial officer. And when we get into invoices, you'll also be reminded that the person submitting the invoices cannot be the same as the person preparing the invoices, which is one of the reasons we also ask you to have a day-to-day fiscal contact. That should be the person that's preparing your invoices, and your financial officer should be the person reviewing and submitting your invoices. And then on the day-to-day program and fiscal contacts, they can be other staff, they can be contracted staff or other staff. They don't necessarily have to be direct employees of the grant or of the grantee. For your grant agreement, you'll hear us refer to this document by a couple of different names. You'll hear us call it the standard agreement. You'll hear us call it the grant agreement. You'll hear us call it the contract. And sometimes you may even hear us call it its form name, which is the standard 213 or the 213. So you'll hear by all these different names, but the most important thing to remember is this is your contract. This is what legally binds you to the BSCC for accepting the grant funds. So this lays out all the provisions of what you've agreed to do with those funds and how you've agreed to manage those funds. This, before you, the document that I have copied on the screen is the Feist sheet. So it's the one that's going to list all of the general information, the grantee name, the contract dates or the grant term. For you guys, it's September 1st, 2020 through February 28th, 2023. It'll list the amount of your grant agreement, and then it'll have all of the particular information. This is the document that has to be signed by both the grantee and the BSCC to qualify as a fully executed contract. And I know that a couple of you are under contract fully. Some of you are still waiting. I do know we're getting close, and we'll be able to kind of address those things in a minute. Reporting requirements. This is another key component of your grant agreement. This is something that you are telling us that you will adhere to throughout the life of your grant. This is found just after the face sheet in Exhibit A in the scope of work. This is where you're going to find the dates for your quarterly progress reports, and those are due to the BSCC, and they'll describe the progress that you're making towards your program objectives. We will talk in more detail on day 3 about progress reports. I think the key takeaway for you today is twofold. One, remember that these are the things that you have agreed that you would provide to the BSCC. And 2, you can always find these dates in your grant agreement. So all you have to do is refer back to your grant agreement. Oh, these are my dates. We do not send reminders technically about these dates. So it is on you to make sure that you have highlighted these dates and are getting your documents into us at the times that they've been reported. Your progress report templates were recently posted on the ARG website, and you'll hear a little bit more about them on Wednesday. Danielle will show you how to navigate to them and what they look like and how to complete them. In the meantime, please note that we are past the November 16th due date. And what we're going to do for that is roll together those report dates for Q1 and Q2 and ask you to submit one report on that February 15th due date. That'll cover the entirety of the reporting period from September 1st. A little bit about advance payments. Let's talk about the money. Show me the money. For advance payments, this is a unique grant in the respect that one of the things the ESC decided was because this was going to CBOs, they wanted to provide an element of support for CBOs and went to the advance payment model for you guys. So a couple of things to note about advance payment is that we do not initiate the advance payment process until your contract has been fully executed. And by fully executed, we mean signed by both the grantee and BSCC. Our Deputy Director, Ricardo Goodridge, is the person who signs to execute those on our end. Once both folks have agreed or have signed, reviewed all the documents and signed and dated those, then you are considered fully executed. So once that has happened, we will on our end, Veronica, Adriana, and Danielle, they work together, or Veronica as your primary analyst will make sure that your first payment has been initiated. You will not need to do anything to initiate that first payment other than making sure that you have signed your grant agreement. Once you are at that fully executed date, we'll have about 75 days to go through our processes on our side through the state controller's office, our accounting practices, things like that. And then that check will be initiated and mailed out to the address we have on your payee data form. And then after you have, I'm sorry, let me back up. Your first advance payment, you'll get 3. You'll have 1/3 of your total award. That's your first payment, and that's the one that we will initiate for you. After you get that first payment and you've started expending funds and using that fund to implement your project, then you will be able to request your second payment once you have demonstrated that you have spent down 80% of your previous disbursement, okay? And what that means is you have to have submitted all of your invoices, and they had to have been approved by the BSCC that documents that you have arrived at that 80% threshold before you can submit your request for that next advance payment, And it'll be the same process for your third advance payment as well. The other thing to note is when you receive your disbursement, you do need to deposit those funds into a bank account, and those funds shall not be commingled with any other funds in your account. And what that means, it does not mean that you have to have separate bank accounts for your different funding streams, but it does mean that you have to have an internal tracking and coding system that allows you and us to see the movement of your funds based on your internal coding of individual funding streams. So your tracking system should allow you to clearly identify and reconcile your ARG dollars. So that's what we mean when we say they should not be commingled. The other key thing to remember is once you put those funds in your bank account, you do need to be able to track any interest that's earned on those funds. And especially for rental assistance, you guys are getting some pretty large sums of money. So once it goes into the bank, your bank should be paying some interest on those funds. So you do need to be able to track that interest earned, and you have to report that as project income. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the invoices on day 3, but just know that that is an important piece of what you have to do for some of the financial management components of this project. Okay, invoices. For your invoices, this is where you will be reporting your expenditures to us once that you have been under a fully executed contract. The key thing here is one, that your due dates are listed here, and your due dates are also identified in your invoice workbook. There's a tab at the end that Adriana will show you when we do invoices on Wednesday. There's a tab at the end that says due dates, and you can pull that up at any time. If you don't remember when your due dates are, when your invoices are due, you can pull that tab up and flag those dates for you. Once your contract has been fully executed and you've received that notification from us, please make sure that you go ahead and submit your first quarter invoice. As you can see, your first invoice was due November 16th, but we know that you guys haven't quite been under contract yet, or all of you are not under contract, and I don't think any of you have received a disbursement as of yet. So if you are still waiting for a disbursement, or you're still waiting to finalize your contract, just know that you will be able to charge back to September 1st, which is your contract start date, for any eligible and allowable expenses. Has anyone actually started incurring expenses ahead of receiving your disbursement? No? Oh.
To actually start the program and like manage the program, yes. To like
okay.
Initiate it.
Okay. And which organization are you?
I'm with Homeboy Industries.
Homeboy. Okay.
This is KJ Williams from the Men of Valor Academy. We have as well.
Okay. Okay. So for those of you who may have already started incurring some expenses, so you've kind of fronted that money and you're waiting for your disbursement, make sure that 1, you're tracking those expenses well, and 2, make sure that those expenses are going to be lined out in the project budget as it was proposed, because those are going to be the things that are going to be important to determine if those expenses are allowable and will be reimbursed. And while typically there usually is no problem with, you being able to charge back to September 1st if you're starting in advance, we do like to say, per our grant guide, some expenses incurred after the contract start date but before the execution date may not be reimbursed. However, in discussions with some of my colleagues, I do understand that it is a rare occurrence to have eligible expenses not be reimbursed, but it is prudent that I let you know of this caveat. And I think the best thing I can say in terms of advising you here is to make sure, again, that any expenses that you have started to incur are in line with your proposed budget, because that's what we'll be looking at to determine if it's an eligible cost. And then if not, you need to make sure that it's definitely in line with your project scope. And if we need to start the budget modification process in advance, we can start that as well. So that's the key thing to note there about your invoices. And again, we'll get more into the invoicing process on Wednesday. Special conditions. This one, the key here, the main thing for you to be aware of on this part, this is in Exhibit D of your grant agreement under the special terms and conditions section. The key thing to remember here is that if you subcontract for any purpose, that you have to make sure that all subcontractors comply with the eligibility requirements that are stated in the ARG RFP and as described in Appendix B. You have the sole responsibility of holding your subcontractors to the same standards that you are held to by the BSCC. So that is your primary role, and that's the key thing to drive home for you when we talk about the subcontractor component. This is a look at the NGO assurance. Many of you, should be familiar with this document because it was part of your RFP application package. If you do use an NGO as a sub, then you must remember to complete the Appendix B, first of all. And second, you must remember that you have to ensure compliance with these criteria. And by these criteria, we mean like these bullet points. So you want to make sure that they're registered with the California Secretary of State office, have a valid business license, et cetera, et cetera. You want to make sure that you're very familiar with that NGO form. And you want to make sure that anyone that you subcontract with that is an NGO meets those criteria. Additionally, if you do not have NGOs identified now, but as you're moving through, as we know things change as you're going through your project and you end up subcontracting with an NGO, then you are responsible to continuously update that information for us. So once you add an NGO subcontractor, you need to make sure that you pull that Appendix B form, fill it out, and send that in to us so that we will have that information in your grant file. When we talk about making sure that your NGOs meet the criteria, this is how we confirm our folks. So all of you grantees, we check the California Secretary of State website. We go to this link and we put your information. This is how we confirm that you are validly registered. We do recommend, as you are confirming your NGO subcontractors, that you also utilize this site to make sure that your folks are in line with our requirements as well. The last thing to share, I think it's the last thing, maybe not, is the conflict of interest. The Executive Steering Committee is the team that got together and created this request for proposals that you all originally applied to back in 2019. What you would need to do is look at the list, look at all of the names, look at the different organizations, and you need to make sure that you identify if you have any conflicts with any of the folks on this list. The folks who were on the original ESC, and because you guys were in that original applicant pool for the first RFP and still under those grant requirements or under that grant cycle term, these conflicts are still applicable. So you just want to make sure that those conflicts don't apply to any of your organizations. If so, please reach out. We do not believe we'll have any issues because we should have already screened those out. But if you do think that you'll have a conflict, please let us know so that we can make sure to address those immediately. And the conflict of interest requirements do last for the full grant cycle. Prior approvals. This one is really, really important. So I want to emphasize this. All of these items on the list require prior approval before you purchase them. Food and beverage, gift cards, incentives, vehicles, out-of-state travel. And another one that I forgot to add here is any single purchase expense over $3,500 does require prior approval. So I want to make sure that you understand, even if the items are listed in your project budget as when you submitted your application, you will still need to do a prior approval. You'll need to submit a memo for food and beverages identifying how you intend to utilize such items. And you only need to do it once. You don't need to do it each time you make that purchase, but you need to do it once and it'll be fine throughout the entire grant cycle. But you do need to have that explicit prior approval to purchase food and beverages. If you need additional information, you can certainly refer to the grant guide on page 26 for the specific requirements for the food and beverage step. Similarly, you will need explicit prior approval to purchase gift cards, incentives, what we call participant support items. Again, even if those items were listed in your original budget or in your proposed budget, you will still need to get that prior approval from the field rep, that's me. You are also required for the participant support items, gift cards, and incentives. You are also required to have and follow any internal policies that you've created, policies or procedures, as well as you need to maintain tracking and documentation of such. If you do not have tracking forms, or if you need to create some, we do have some sample forms that I can share with you. But you will need to, at a minimum, document and track the type of incentive that's being distributed, the date it was distributed, the name and signature of the individual that is receiving the item, the name and signature of the staff person distributing the item, and the name and signature of a supervisor. And again, those specifics are located on page 27 of the grant admin guide. Any of these items could be allowed or they could be disallowed. So you want to make sure that you get prior approval before you make any of those purchases. Vehicles, those require prior approval as well. Even if it's in your budget, you still need to, prior to purchasing that vehicle, you still need to provide a memo to the BSCC identifying what you're purchasing. You need to lay out the comparisons between leasing and purchasing. We need to see that you have done your homework and that you're using these funds in the best way possible. So all of that stuff will be in the grant guide. And out-of-state travel is heavily regulated for grant funds. So if you do intend to include any out-of-state travel for training or other purposes, you do want to make sure to check with me, because we do have some areas or some states within our country that we cannot use grant funds to pay for. So you definitely want to make sure that you confer with your field rep in advance of any purchases like that. And if you've started doing some things and for some reason have not had an opportunity to get prior approval, please reach out to me so that we can have some conversations and figure out how to clear that up. Coronavirus. As you know, we are still in the midst of a pandemic. And we also know that when you submitted your applications, we were not dealing with a pandemic. So if, as you are moving through and providing services and launching your projects, if you realize that you have to make some tweaks, please reach out to me. Let me know so we can discuss, what needs to happen, how we can, support the process. We're certainly all on board with having you come up with creative alternatives, whatever you need to do to make sure you can still continue to implement your project. We just need to be able to work with you and make sure that legally we aren't outside of the confines of what your proposal was approved to do and things like that. Sometimes we may need to confer with our legal counsel to make sure we don't run into any conflicts or other issues. So please, please, please make sure that you reach out to me if you have some specific concerns that you may need to address within your program proposal or the way you initially plan to provide services that you may need to change. We will do stuff on a case by case. And the other difference is typically we require a lot of things by wet signature, but because of the pandemic, we are allowing electronic signatures. So you will be able to submit your documents via an electronic signature, at least until the pandemic is resolved and we're back in the office or things have changed that way. And of course, most importantly, as you are designing your projects and implementing around the changes with coronavirus, please make sure that you are remaining safe, keeping your staff safe, and adhering to all of the CDC health guidelines. The 2020 Grant Administration Guide, hot off the presses. You can see that it was just released July 2020. This is just a link or the update so that you know that we do have the new Grant Admin Guide. It is available on our website. We definitely highly encourage you to take a look at it, make sure that you are familiar with it. Pretty much anything you'll need to know, any questions you may have about your project or what you can charge, what you can't charge, all of those things, even dealing with your, how you put together your HR policies and things like that. All of that stuff is laid out for you in the Grant Admin Guide. If you need additional support or information, certainly your team, your ARG team is here to provide that support for you, but you do have a very good resource right here for you in the Grant Admin Guide on the BSCC website. Those of you who applied in 2019 may have been familiar with our previous guide. And just so that you will know, when you go to the new grant guide, you will have this first sheet that will tell you what the changes were from the 2016 to the now 2020. You can see I've highlighted two changes, which we just talked about, food and beverages and program incentives. So you'll be able to see all of the different things that changed when you go into the new grant guide, and you'll be able to make sure that you're up to speed and up to date. And then of course, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to your ARG team. Key takeaways. Number one, make sure that you are aware of and adhering to your grant agreement. Make sure that you are meeting all of your due dates. Make sure that you are including the BSCC required language in your subcontracts. Make sure that you are updating your NGO assurances and sending those in to us as you are adding subcontractors or subgrantees. Make sure that you're keeping your contact information current and up to date, utilizing that grantee contact sheet. Anytime that you change positions, we understand that in the world of CBOs, you can have turnover, people change, you may need to move people in positions, people promote, different things like that. So as your key project staff are changing, please make sure you send that information to us so that we are communicating with the right people. The other key takeaway here is to know when you need prior approval. All of those items we just talked about and looked at, you need prior approval. We do not recommend getting in the habit of, oh, we'll do this and we'll get approval later. No, work on getting the prior approval. That way you don't spend your money and then find out later that we can't expense for it or we can't reimburse for it. So make sure that you're getting your prior approvals as needed and make sure that you read your admin guide. Are there any questions now?
Hi, Tanya. I'm just going to jump in and share a question from Ken Weeks
Mhm.
from Family Assistance Program.
Mhm.
This was back when you were talking about the advance payment. His
Yes.
question is, based on the fact that we signed fully in October, when would we expect our first payment?
This is family assistance?
Yes.
Okay. I do believe that your first advance has been requested, and we're probably just a few days or weeks out.
I can actually respond to that. This is
Oh,
Rosa.
Thank you, Rosa.
Yeah, their check is set to cut on the, I think it was the 16th. It's either the 16th or the 18th. It's one of those. So this week.
So this week, awesome.
Yeah, and then it'll be sent directly to them from the state controller's office.
Awesome.
So they should be getting it soon, very soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Rosa.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Rosa.
I just say thank you guys. That's great. We're also working with you on the warm handoff. So we've been having a little bit difficulty getting the cash flow because we're still waiting for an invoice to be released there. So that's great to know that this check is coming. That will help us as we process through. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
The next question is from Kim Carter.
Mhm.
If the incentive is in the budget that was approved, do we still need to get approval again?
Yes. Even if it's in the budget, you do need to work with me and get the approval. We do have some memo forms that we want to have on file. The thing to remember is just because it's in the budget doesn't mean it's going to be an approved or an allowable expense. So once we get your project underway and you start submitting your invoices, and our analyst team is starting to scrutinize those submissions a little more closely, then they'll be able to determine whether or not they are allowable or not allowable, which is the reason you want to make sure that you get that prior approval, even though it was in your budget.
That's it for chat.
Okay. Any other questions that anyone just wants to unmute and ask?
Will these PowerPoint presentations be in the electronic kind of toolbox you've been talking about?
Absolutely, yes. PowerPoints will be, the recordings from the sessions will be as well, and then any documents that we go through or share will also be added. Any other questions? Going once, going twice. Okay, we have another presentation to come to hear from. Who's up next? Drum roll, please. Homeboy Industries. Woo!
Woohoo! Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you for 3 days. I'm Michaela Ron. I'm a co-project director with Homeboy Industries. On the call, we have an amazing team. My co-project director, Shirley Torres, is on, who is the chief of our program. I'm the chief of education and research at Homeboy Industries. We also have on the call our financial support, Tomoko Patrick, who's amazing. Our terrific program manager who runs all of case management, Steve Avalos, and our outside evaluator, Patricia O'Driscoll. So we have a great team involved in the work. I'm going to have Shirley in a minute talk a little bit about our 18-month model, but at Homeboy Industries, we're the largest gang intervention program in the nation. We have at least 8,000 folks walking through when there's no virus. We are open as an essential service, so we're not, we still have people showing up. And we also have our training program, which is an 18-month program that people enter that Shirley can describe in a minute. For us, housing is our largest problem. It always is in reentry. We know as a state and a nation, we're struggling with housing. So we're very, very excited about this grant. We couldn't be more happy to expand our services in this area and to be able to offer people who come out and re-enter a chance at a life and to thrive. And so as part of our 18-month program to be able to build this whole component out and all the different types of assistance that we're going to be working on. We're just truly thrilled and feel a blessing walking into 2021. With that, I'll have Shirley is on, I believe. I can't see, I'm sure she is, and have her describe our 18-month model.
Thanks, Michaela. And I just want to take time to say I'm honored to be on this call with everyone as we work together to provide hope for men and women who are coming home that are impacted by trauma and isolation and incarceration in ways that if you've been working and if you're committed to, if you're committed to what that looks like, they have the least chances of, as someone said, of really landing permanent housing, and are coming home to places where they have families that may not be as supportive. And so at Homeboy, what we see ourselves as is just trying to keep the hope alive, especially during this pandemic, and trying to make sure that in very safe ways, we still provide proximity to human companionship and our community, and are welcoming people home who've been gone for a very long time. I've been part of Homeboy Industries for now almost 20 years. We've been doing this work for 3 decades and really been committed and loyal to those that are considered least likely to succeed, gang members specifically. And really our 18-month model is about how do we minimize all the social, structural and emotional barriers to reintegration. This means that we minimize every hoop imaginable to really coming back. And so rather than, have these expectations and ask people to do A, B, and C, what we do is we employ people first through our 18-month model. What we do is we employ them and provide on-the-job training. But really what we say at Homeboy is we're a one-stop shop that offers all the resources imaginable under one roof of what people need to transform their lives, from case management, workforce development. We have 7 social enterprises where there's job training. We do the intensive case management. We have classes that really help people with addiction, all the classes imaginable that are required to be under supervision of parole and probation. And what we try to do is really offer community and healing for folks who've never been afforded that in relationships. It's my honor to do this with Steve Avalos, who's now our project and director of case management and navigation. Like Steve, like many of our folks, we now have 50% of our senior staff who is leading the organization they were once clients and really are teaching us a lot about what people need. And so we as Michaela said, we serve about 8,000 folks coming through our door each year. 200 to 300 are employed in our 18-month model and transition into permanent employment. And what we hope to do with this grant is really meet some of the challenges that we have faced, especially during this time as housing and the cost of living continues to rise. We know that the men and women we work with, as much as they've done to change and transform their lives, we are still facing barriers to get them employed. Get them housing and get them safe housing in neighborhoods where they're not going to have to continue to survive. And so that's what we hope to do, and really, again, continue to really use this housing first model to make sure that people have a place to lay their head and not have to figure out some of those basics to really help them move to a place where they can thrive in our community.
Sorry, I was talking on mute. Thank you so much, Shirley and Michaela. Amazing, sounds like an amazing program. And I'm excited to see what you guys bring to bear as well. And I did want to mention, I heard you say housing first, utilizing the housing first principles and model. So thank you for mentioning that, because yes, we will actually have someone speaking with us tomorrow that's going to talk a little bit more in detail about housing first, and hopefully provide some insights as you guys are implementing your projects and finding ways to continue to make sure that you're weaving housing first philosophies into your project delivery or into your service delivery model. So thank you so much, Homeboy Industries. Okay. Next up is the fabulous, amazing, all that.
Do not oversell me.
We're going to turn it over to Helene Zittner, who will present to you on the principles of effective intervention. Give me just one sec, Helene. I will stop sharing so you can.
You need to make me a co-host too.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Of course.
Sorry, we didn't do that already. Give me 1 second. Stand by. It would help if I could find you.
I'm right here.
I know.
Well, I'll go ahead and start talking.
There you are.
Y'all. Oh, okay. I was going to say if you've ever met me, you know I can talk. So
go ahead. It's all you.
Okay. It's me now. Okay. Let me try. There we go. Okay. Okay. I'm assuming you can all see that leader slide. Nodding heads. Yes. Thank you. Okay. So good morning again, and congratulations again to you all for receiving the ARG grant. Like I said before, I can't wait to hear the different program components that you have over the next couple days. So I'm a field representative with the BSCC and one of Tanya's colleagues, and she's asked me to share with you some high-level information, which is about 40 hours condensed down into about an hour about effective interventions. And I know some of you who have had either prior ARG grants or any of our other BSCC grants have probably heard me talk about these concepts before, but if you haven't, some of this information may be new to you. You may have heard about some of these concepts, but not sure really how to apply them with your projects. And then some of you might already be applying these concepts to your projects. So regardless of which one of these categories you fall in, hopefully you find a nugget or two as a takeaway, and or it being a good reminder, even validating what you're doing currently in your program. I know that you'll probably have some questions about some of this information. So if I am not either able to cover it or you have some questions later as you're actually implementing your projects, BSCC staff can assist in getting you your project to be as effective as possible. And that's really our goal. Our goal is the same as yours, is to provide the most effective services to your clients and to reduce recidivism, which would provide a better quality of life for you, your participants in your community. Well, there we go. So the information and materials presented today are from the work of Dr. Ed Latessa and his staff at the University of Cincinnati, the Corrections Institute there. So as we go through some of this presentation, I want to point out that there'll be some terminology that is heavily justice system-based lingo. And as this information comes from the research that is correctional-based and the meta-analysis that was all been done based on that correctional-based research, and the work done by the Corrections Institute. So just a really brief background, about 7 years ago or so, the UCCI staff came out to California and certified several of us here at the BSCC in monitoring programs using the CPC, which is the Correctional Programs Checklist. And what it does is the CPC takes about 4 of our staff, about 1.5 to 2 days to complete the tool. And it looks at the program in 5 different areas. It looks at the program leadership, it looks at the characteristics of staff, client assessment, treatment characteristics, and quality assurance. And what this does is it results, the score of this tool results in the baseline score in each of those 5 areas to help the program make a blueprint for assessing short-term and long-term changes to their program. So what does evidence-based mean? Everybody throws around that term, so we're going to kind of break it down a little bit. There are 2 types of evidence. There's anecdotal and there's empirical. And as you know, anecdotal is the lowest form of evidence. We all know these these types of evidence, they're stories about a particular individual or a situation that often is generalized to a greater population. But after looking at the data, it really is only one or two memorable individuals that have made it seem like it's a more widespread scenario. It's information that's not based on facts or careful study. It's non-scientific observations, which don't really provide proof, but may, assist in seeing the whole picture for a research effort. It reports or observes unscientific scenarios and unscientific observers. It's casual observations or indicators rather than a rigorous or scientific analysis. Or it could be information that's just passed around by word of mouth, but not really documented scientifically. So where anecdotal evidence gets a little problematic is when people make decisions solely based on that. So as an example, I don't know about any of you, but I've put on the COVID-19 pounds here. So if you are out on the internet and you look at diet supplement websites, you'll probably find that there's tons and tons of testimonials that all provide anecdotal evidence. These testimonials seem to lend some credit to the idea that each diet treatment will be tremendously effective, especially when you or me want to the outcome to be weight loss to be true. Yet, unfortunately, we know most of those testimonials are anecdotal and are not true. The other type of evidence is empirical, and that is considered when it can be observed by many people and all will agree as to what they observed. So a good example of that would be reading a thermometer. No matter who observes the thermometer, it will display the same temperature. And the counterexample of that is the physically sensing of warmth or coolness. So even though the thermometer may say 72 degrees, observer A might sense that the room is too warm, while observer B might sense that that same room is too cool. So these observations differ depending on the observer, so they're considered subjective. Empirical evidence is not dependent on any one observer or the objective, and it appears the same no matter who observes that evidence. So it may be easier just to think of evidence-based practices or strategies as data-informed decision-making. So it takes a bit of strategizing and using assessment tools that have been validated to the needs of the individuals that you're serving, as well as making sure that the treatment plans and the interventions used are not just cookie cutter or a one-size-fits-all, but that you're using the tools and the treatment models that have been replicated over and over that have been getting the exact same positive results. That way, the results that you want as your program outcomes will be the same as those interventions that have been replicated. So one of the biggest issues that we've seen in the field is that it's not that the programs aren't using assessments or other validated tools, but the results of those tools are just going into a case file. So the information isn't being used to personalize a treatment plan or a case management plan. So it's not enough just to do the assessments, but to actually use it for how you will serve the individuals in your program. So I'm going to steal something from one of our analysts from a prior orientation. And sorry, Adriana, if you're going to use this too, but I'm stealing it first. If you have a beverage near you, and if you take a sip of your beverage, each time I say the word either recidivism or recidivate, I promise by the end of today, you will be very well hydrated. So when looking at all of our programs, the bottom line is that we want to reduce the rates of recidivism of our participants. So research analytically demonstrates that recidivism rates can be significantly reduced through theoretically sound and well-designed programs that appropriately apply the principles of effective intervention. So we have to move away from, well, we just know it's working, or the participants tell us it's working, and those types. What works really is not a single program or intervention, but a body of knowledge and meta-analysis covered over 30 years of research that's been conducted by numerous scholars across North America. And I have lots and lots of research for you if you want to read. I'm actually going to try to put together something on the website that Tanya can share with you once I get that up, of all the different body of knowledge about that goes into this PowerPoint. But the one thing I do want to stress too is that we know that none of this information is really impactful unless there is human interaction, human intervention, and trust. So I can't really see all of y'all, but how many of you have heard of R&R, risk needs responsivity? Kind of, sort of. I know some of you guys who have heard me before, you should be raising your hands. So what this basic principles of effective intervention is the who, which is who we should be serving based on risk to recidivate, the what are the actual needs of the individual based on their assessment, and the how. So how will the individual respond to their case plan or their services? But there's also the how well, and how well the project is following and staying true to the model that they've implemented. This seems to be the hardest part for most programs, because everybody is really wanting to work with the participants, but you kind of forget that last little part to make sure that you're staying true to the model or to the fidelity of the intervention that you've picked. So it requires constant check-ins and oversight so that the provider and or the project is not straying or drifting from the structured curriculum. And so the R&R model, the risk needs responsivity, I realize has an F as part of that, but it seems silly to call it RNARF unless you're fans of Pinky and the Brain, and then it's quite fun to say. So let's start with risk. High risk refers to those individuals with a higher probability of recidivating versus lower risk individuals who display prosocial characteristics and have a lower chance of recidivating. See, I told you you'd be very well hydrated if you're taking a sip. Risk tells us who to target and who to serve. So there's two basic types of risk factors for criminal type behavior, and one is static, and those are unchangeable risk factors like criminal history or biological factors such as IQ that you cannot change. Then there's the dynamic, which those are those malleable risk factors like antisocial attitudes and substance use, which can change with effective interventions. So the dynamic risk factors provide the basis for developing a treatment plan. They address the factors that will reduce risk, and then changing those dynamic factors changes the probability of recidivism. So examples of higher risk traits or combination of these to identify for higher risk is antisocial attitudes and values, which, you know, those individuals who minimize the criminal behavior and usually don't take responsibility for their actions. Antisocial peer associations, they hang around with others that tend to get into trouble. Lack of self-control and self-management skills, where they act very impulsively. They may not finish school. They don't tend to keep jobs for very long. They also may have substance use issues, or they have an extensive history with the justice system. So the risk principle basically looks at placing individuals appropriately into programs. And so placing low risk individuals in programs designed for higher risk individuals really does disrupt their pro-social network, and the very attributes that keep them low risk to begin with are interrupted. So you know, putting them in a program that interrupts their school, their employment, things with their family really does increase their failure rates. So an example would be as your teenager gets in trouble with the law, maybe stealing something, and then would you want them placed into a program that's designed for heavy drug users? So that's kind of the example. It isn't to say that lower risk individuals shouldn't need some sort of intervention or be held accountable. It's just not the same way a higher risk individual would. So when we talk about higher risk individuals, we're talking about those who have fewer protective factors in their lives, those characteristics that are associated with a lower likelihood of negative outcomes, or in this case, reduces the likelihood that the individual will recidivate. So this slide shows a graph from the Ohio Halfway House Community-Based Correctional Facility Study. that shows the treatment effects for lower risk individuals placed in intensive programs. So across the bottom of the chart are all these different intensive programs designed for higher risk individuals. So even though the chart may seem a little bit counterintuitive, as the positive numbers show that there's a reduction in recidivism, so a positive outcome, and the negative numbers show actually an increase in recidivism. So looking at the red bar, the low-risk individuals in program KK increased their recidivism rate by 29% because they were a low-risk individual put into a program or an intervention designed for a higher risk individual. The black bar is all the programs aggregated together, looks at the average of all of those programs on the x-axis with the low risk individuals participating in them. And even across the board, it still increased the recidivism rate by 4%. So as you can see, most of the programs actually made their participants worse with higher rates of recidivism. The next slide is the same graphic, but with when high-risk individuals are placed in those exact same programs. So now you can see that the program KK actually treating their appropriate higher risk individuals and a program with curriculum designed specifically for this population, the program actually decreased the participants' recidivism by 32%. That's the green column. And then the black bar again is the average of all the programs, but this time with higher risk in participants, now shows an average decrease in recidivism by 8%. So the trend is similar for moderate and moderate to high risk individuals, basically showing that it is extremely important to place individuals and their risk level in the appropriate programs and interventions. So we're going to move to the second principle of effective intervention, which is the need principle. And this basically states that programs should target crime-producing needs, or in other words, criminogenic factors. Programs need to make sure that the vast majority of their interventions are focused on the criminogenic factors. And we'll get into what those are on the next slide. So one of my favorite terms in the University of Cincinnati's terms is correctional quackery. And it refers to the use of treatment interventions based neither on existing knowledge of the causes of crime nor on the existing knowledge of what programs have been shown to change criminogenic behavior in individuals. And so it's not to say that these types of programs can't be part of a holistic approach to an individual's recovery or treatment plan. But when these types of programs, such as yoga or equine therapy, music circles, when they're used as the primary treatment or at a higher ratio to something like cognitive behavioral therapy, the positive results and a reduction in recidivism is lowered. So we realize that departments' ability to provide specific programs can be limited by resources, operational conditions, logistics, and staffing, all of that. However, it's important to remember the programs offered will have great consequences for the participants. So with dynamic risk factors, those that are malleable are also referred to as criminogenic needs and are considered to be the most appropriate targets for intervention by programs. Some of the most robust criminogenic risks include antisocial attitudes and values, antisocial peer associations, substance use, lack of self-control, and self-management skills. So this chart is basically showing that all criminogenic needs may not have equal influence on the recidivism equator or the equation. Generally speaking, there are 7 criminogenic needs. Those are on the left-hand side. Of those 7, those top 3 are the most significant and have the most significant impact on future recidivism and should be considered the primary intervention targets. So targeting pro-criminal attitudes, antisocial personality, and antisocial peer associations will give you more payoff for getting positive outcomes. There's a trickle-down effect that influences the 3 needs that impact the next 4, which are also really important, but should basically be considered more of a secondary target for intervention unless one or more of these risk factors are assessed as central to the criminogenic behavior like substance use. So for example, a program offers vocational training for participants, but they can't seem to maintain employment because either their boss is a jerk or the hours are stupid or the rules are dumb. And you know, why is that? Well, because the top 3 criminogenic needs haven't been addressed. So your participant has not changed their attitudes, values, and beliefs from antisocial to pro-social. So the specific intervention strategy for an individual will, of course, depend on the combination of needs that they present and the degree to which each may be problematic and the person's unique circumstances. So attitudes can include antisocial values, beliefs, and emotional states such as rage, anger, defiance, or taking on a criminal-like identity. And then antisocial personality can include impulsivity, lack of empathy, lack of self-control, self-regulation, weak problem-solving skills, and egocentrism. We know that one's environment has a really big impact on the success of an individual. So addressing their associations with peers that have similar attitudes and beliefs will help reduce their risk. So the same is true with targeting the needs of the family. It's so important to provide some sort of family-centric intervention and at a minimum, just educating on the interventions and treatment of their family member. Because if the individual returns home or to their family situation and or their community and that situation hasn't changed or can't continue to support, it can't continue to support the work that the individual has already completed either within the program or work that they've done as part of the interventions, their rate then tends to diminish, or the rate of their success rate tends to diminish. So the last 2 on the left side, the education, employment, and leisure time, have also been correlated to reducing recidivism. So by addressing how the participant spends their day, whether or not that's in school, a job, their free time, providing pro-social activities along with a change in their attitudes, values, and beliefs towards these activities will decrease their risk to recidivate. And then the non-criminogenic needs that are on the right-hand side can still be addressed, but the research has shown that the ratio for targeting non-criminogenic needs versus those on the left hand, the criminogenic needs, are 4 to 1. So that means basically that for every 1 need addressed on the right-hand side of the table, there should be 4 needs addressed from the left-hand side of the table. And the one thing that's not on the left side is a person's prior history. So research has shown that the best future predictor for recidivating is a person's prior history with the justice system, which is actually, like I said, included in a criminogenic side on the left. But because it is not a malleable characteristic, they don't include that. So targeting a higher number of crime-producing needs increases the effects of programs on recidivism rates. So in this chart, it shows the program that will target 4 to 6 more criminogenic needs than non-criminogenic needs, which is closer to the 4 to 1 ratio, reduces recidivism on an average of 31%. So programs that target only 1 to 3 criminogenic needs, those that were on the left-hand side versus the non-criminogenic needs that were on the right-hand side, those associate with only a slight increase in reducing recidivism. So it's just barely there at the line. So as you know, higher risk individuals don't have just one risk factor, they possess a cluster. And so many of these risk factors influence one another. So for example, a substance use behavior typically puts the person in contact with other people who are antisocial in their orientation, like they're drug dealers or other users. And a person with an antisocial personality who has a temperament issue, such as anger, poor self-regulation, or impulse control, will also have family conflict. So it stands to reason then that the greater the number of criminogenic needs addressed, the more likely it is that the person's risk to recidivate will decline. And again, have lots and lots of articles that I'm trying to put together for you out on the website. So if you have trouble sleeping at night while you're at home or during the holidays, get all those out there for you. So up to this point, are there any questions? So far, no?
Chat
Adriana?
has nothing.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll keep going.
Thanks, Elaine.
So then there's the, well, let's get to the responsivity principle. And it can be divided into two components, general and specific. So the general responsivity principle states that the most effective interventions tend to be those based on cognitive, behavioral, and social learning theories. So specifically, interventions should be behavioral strategies such as operant conditioning, as well as social learning techniques, including modeling, shaping, role-playing. You'll hear me say that several more times through this presentation, the modeling, the shaping, and role-playing with the participants. So this cognitive restructuring should be integrated into all treatment components to get the biggest, as you'd say, bang for your buck. So the specific responsivity principle, on the other hand, underscores the need for facilitators to match individuals to treatment and staff. And after careful consideration of key characteristics of the individual, such as motivation to change, potential learning deficits, and anxiety. So for example, if you have a highly anxious person in your program, you shouldn't probably match them with a staff member who's more in your face, not necessarily confrontational, but that's very high energy. So that high anxious individual may not respond as well to the interventions. So it's really critical to match the interventions to the characteristics of individuals. So participants, as you know, have a wide variety of individual traits, such as their mental health conditions, gender, cultural background, level of motivation, their learning style, their intelligence level, and all these things have to be considered when selecting the intervention that's most likely to achieve their intended outcomes. So programs that fail to address these traits can hinder successful programming. In addition, research demonstrates that the style of the professional and the match between the participant and the practitioner influences outcome. Now, that being said, we totally understand that all responsivity factors may not be able to be addressed fully within your programs due to resources, staffing, number of providers, the logistics, all that. But at least to acknowledge and potentially addressing engagement factors can increase your positive outcomes. Okay, so and then just to note, there's not a ton of research that supports the specific responsivity principle. But there has been a lot of research on the general responsivity principle. So the most effective behavioral and cognitive interventions are ones, as you might know, focus on current factors that influence their behavior. They're action-oriented, they reinforce pro-social behavior, they include cognitive restructuring, and they include skill development with relatable examples. They include approaches that trains family members or the support system of the individual on appropriate techniques. So it's very important for the success of your participants that those closest to them, be it their family, their friends, pastors, teachers, whomever, those who will be in the person's immediate environment to help reinforce the ideals, the language, pro-social values, all those things they've learned in the program to be reiterated back in their environment. So in essence, a support system that will carry on the day-to-day work once they've left the program. Motivation, and more importantly, their willingness to change are the most important parts of the responsivity assessment. So many programs have trained their staff in motivational interviewing as an attempt to engage participants and to assess the extent to which they're ready to make changes in their life even before starting a program. So questions that need to be asked include something like, does the individual have self-awareness that they have a problem that needs to be treated? Are they in denial about the problem? Perceptions regarding the fairness of the criminal justice system, And how is the motivation for long-term change different from the motivation to short-term change? So if possible, motivation should be matched to resources and counseling style or facilitator style. Looking at an individual's cognitive functioning or IQ level is important, as some participants have scores that may be below 80 and will have difficulty completing programs that require a lot of reading, writing, or thinking. When matching people to programs, this can be a factor that tends to be overlooked at times, as the participant may be assumed to be withdrawn, shy, or angry, when really, in fact, they're just missing the skills that are necessary to complete the program. Employment and educational assignments also should be considered under looking at an individual's IQ and their reading levels. We've got gender. So some questions to think about is, should we provide the same treatment to females as males or to LGBTQ individuals? Are the same assessments and classification systems valid for everyone? Obviously, your program isn't a one size fits all, but as you know, there are separate and specific issues that need to be addressed with females and or LGBTQ that are based on how they identify. So this may include trauma services, medical services, sexual abuse, or trafficking services. We've got race and ethnicity, several factors taken into consideration for treatment when offenders or individuals identify with a specific race or ethnicity, and being culturally responsive in your treatment program will provide a greater success in reducing recidivism among the diverse population that you serve. Other things to consider for responsivity is the level of acceptance from treatment providers, unfortunately, impact on accessing resources, how receptive they are to therapy, as well as the predictive accuracy of assessment results. Additionally, there's some studies that have documented that race and ethnicity is correlated with styles of communication. So this can have a major impact in understanding the rules of the group, the curriculum, and even interaction with other participants. You should try to consider personality characteristics such as maturity levels and how that may impact their response to the curriculum. We've got mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, paranoia, which may play a significant role in their response to treatment plan and their success. With co-occurring issues, it's important to realize that in order to be successful in the program, there might be other issues that need to be addressed either prior to treatment or at least simultaneously to your program. And then if you need direction on how to assess which factors should be considered as priorities, begin to look at the last 3 to 12 months of data and who didn't complete a program, analyze why they weren't successful, or different situations that may give you a better direction on what responsivity factors to start with. So this chart illustrates that exact point, is that those programs that address behavioral cognitive factors have a greater reduction in recidivism rates than addressing non-behavioral and cognitive factors. So now we come to the hardest one for programs, is the fidelity principle. And that is the organization or agency providing services that should ensure the intervention is delivered as designed and with the integrity, which includes that assuring staff are modeling appropriate behavior, they're qualified, well-trained, and well-supervised, making sure that barriers are addressed and that services are targeting criminogenic needs, those that were on the left-hand side of that chart, prior slide, making sure appropriate dosage or amount of treatment is provided. There's lots of studies that show that at a certain point, having more hours of a program doesn't necessarily mean longer success or better success. Monitoring the delivery of the programs and activities by administrators or managers over the program. And here's a big one. It's reassessing the participants throughout the program in meeting their targeted behavior or determining whether or not they have additional needs. So if you assess once in the beginning, we all know that as that interaction and trust and flowing with your program throughout, whether or not it's weeks or months, that the participant may actually be more willing to provide more information than they did originally. So reassessing throughout the program to maybe adjust their interventions is really critical. Tracking the recidivism rates of participants, obviously very important. And then having an evaluator working with the program. I know I heard a couple individuals saying that they were working with local colleges or universities. And so an evaluator can take an unbiased look at the data to determine how well the program is working as it's intended. And it's not just a matter of cherry picking a research-based program, so going and getting an off-the-shelf program that is considered EBP. It's important that the leaders ensure the program is monitored and measured frequently to provide the additional information needed for program change and effective implementation. So to illustrate that fidelity principle, this slide shows two different programs. These just happen to be juvenile programs: FFT, Functional Family Therapy, and Aggression Replacement Training, or ART. Excuse me. The blue data column illustrates the reduction in recidivism that can be achieved when the program is delivered with competency and fidelity to the model. And that's all they were looking at in this slide, is the fidelity principle. And then the red data columns show that even when using an EBP, failure to competently deliver the model does result in an increase in recidivism. So in the example on the left-hand side with the FFT programs that were delivered competently and with fidelity to that model, reduced recidivism by 38%. And then those programs not competently delivered actually increased the recidivism rate by 16.7%. And then the same is true with the ART program on the right-hand side, that competently versus incompetently delivered is 24% versus 10.4%. So 24% reducing risk to recidivate, or actually doing harm at 10.4 in actually increasing recidivism. So like the fidelity principle, adherence to the full R&R model can impact recidivism rates. So failure to adhere to the R&R model shows an increase in recidivism rates. So the effects can be shown in this graph, where on the very left-hand side, where it's risk, if only risk is adhered to, not the other N and R, recidivism is reduced by 10%. However, if risk is not adhered to, the recidivism rate is only 3%. If only need, that principle is adhered to, then recidivism is reduced by, the risk to recidivate is reduced to 19%. But if need is not adhered to at all, it actually increases the rate to recidivate by 1%. And then if only the responsivity principle is adhered to, recidivism is reduced by 23%. But if it's not adhered to, then it only is a reduction in recidivating by 4%. I told you that if you were drinking something during this presentation, you'd be very well hydrated. So here are the effects when programs adhere to only pieces of the R&R principle. So if none of the N, R, and R principles are utilized, there is a 2% increase in recidivating. If only one of those R, N, or R principles, just one of them, is adhered to, there's a 2% decrease in recidivism. If there are two of those principles, any combination, is adhered to, there's an 18% decrease in recidivating. But if you use all, or if your program uses all three of the R&R principles and they're adhered to, there's a 26% decrease in recidivating. Are there any questions about the R&R model and the fidelity aspect? I'll look to Adriana because I think she's monitoring chat.
I am, and there is nothing as of yet.
Okay. So I'll keep going. You guys can type stuff in and can answer it at the end of this, or can always take questions through the ARG email box and we can get back to you on those. So cognitive behavioral treatment. So most of you guys know COG, so we'll just go through this briefly, but you know that even if you're using COG, it might validate again for you some of the great work that you're already doing in your programs if you're using CBT models. So the core concept behind CBT is that thinking changes behavior. And then without targeting the thought and belief systems of an individual that goes into that behavior, we're not likely to change that behavior of that person. So if you think of a picture of an iceberg, what's above the water is their behavior, but the bulk of the iceberg is right below the surface. And this is where our thoughts, feelings, and belief systems tend to lie. So while you can't readily see those thoughts that go into the behavior choices that are above the water, it is what drives those choices. So we have to get below the surface into what's really happening in their head to be able to change their behavior. So the most effective form of programming for most moderate and higher risk individuals is cognitive behavioral. And those programs, as you know, address antisocial thinking patterns, they build problem-solving skills, and they apply those behavioral techniques that can equip that individual with new thinking and new skills. And again, this is through repetition, and I'll mention again, repetition, as well as increasing the difficult practice scenarios. So starting out really simply and then getting harder and harder as you go through, and cases that are or scenarios that are actually something that they might have to deal with in their community. So case management plans should indicate the criminogenic needs that are being addressed, and then the interventions and services selected to specifically address them. So the two core components of CBT is cognitive restructuring and cognitive behavioral coping skills. And cognitive restructuring is where we not only identify cognitive distortions or thinking errors, but also provide a replacement for problematic thoughts, which are more likely to lead to healthy pro-social behaviors. So when a person has an abundance of antisocial thoughts, it's important to identify ways to help replace those thoughts with more pro-social alternatives. And then cognitive behavioral coping skills are more geared towards teaching individuals alternative approaches to managing difficult situations. So this approach is used when there seems to be a lack of adaptive thinking or the ability to problem solve and make good decisions. And this is where we can teach participants improved social and coping skills. So over the last 2 to 3 decades, there's been numerous literature reviews and meta-analysis conducted to examine the effectiveness of various justice interventions. So in spite of differences in samples and statistical techniques, the conclusion drawn by the authors are very similar, is that programs that reduce recidivism possess several common characteristics. And this is basically the list of those characteristics that have been identified. So again, having some sort of educational and training component for family members as part of your program will help decrease the likelihood of individuals recidivating. Those constant reinforcements and those familiar program buzzwords can help the individual with appropriate problem solving in difficult scenarios or making good decisions when faced with those hard choices in real world situations. So this slide basically says it all. Programs should use COG interventions throughout the entire program. So these strategies are found to be important in implementing CBT. So as I mentioned, cognitive restructuring, which is identifying cognitive distortions or thinking errors and providing a replacement for problematic thoughts. Social skills training focuses on practicing pragmatic skills of living. Combining this with cognitive behavioral therapy will help individuals focus on changing how they think about social situations as well as how they behave. So you got problem solving, which is working through practical ways to solve potential problems in advance through step-by-step process, and emotional regulation, helping those individuals to learn to adjust and regulate their emotional reactions to match the appropriateness of the situation. And I told you again, I promised you'd hear me say it a couple more times, modeling and role playing are crucial to behavior change. So let's refer back to that original list of criminogenic needs that I showed you a little while ago. This slide reminds us that what to focus on and that those 7 needs listed on the left-hand side are where we need to put our energy. So again, to be effective, decisions about which treatment targets to use must be driven by the results of each person's needs assessment. And there should be, as a reminder, a ratio of 4:1, 4:1 criminogenic to non-criminogenic ratio for needs to be targeted. So if you're going to do something on the right-hand side, you should be doing focusing 4 of those criminogenic needs also. But as a reminder, if your program targets 3 or less needs, all those needs should fall under that criminogenic needs column on the left. And to stress again, we know that none of this is really impactful at all without human interaction, human intervention, and the trust in their providers. So also, one last component of effective programming is behavior modification system. So with this, it's the use of rewards and punishers to encourage new skills, pro-social behavior, or to extinguish antisocial behavior and promote behavioral change. And the goal of a modification system, behavior modification system that is to develop a mechanism that increases compliance while the individual is involved in programming, but more importantly, increases their long-term pro-social behavior. So your behavior modification system can include things like specific praise or feedback on their performance, indirect praise, group recognition, pre-COVID, an extended curfew, less frequent meetings with staff, assist as a group facilitator, or again on Zoom, maybe helping to run a group or act as a mentor, badges, ribbons, certificates, gift certificates, and maybe a job in a special setting. And again, we know that COVID has changed the landscape on how you provide different programs. But, even just a certificate up on a wall or sent to their house goes a long way for raising their self-esteem. So with that, I want to thank you for spending the last 45 minutes with me and ask if there are any questions.
So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat as of yet.
Okay. Well, if you do, you know where to either find me or Tanya or your ARG inbox, and you can provide any of those questions, and we will definitely get answers out to you. So with that, Tanya, I think it's back to you.
Thank you so much, Helene. I appreciate you taking time to share with us today. It was actually a good reminder of the information for me as well. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you all for participating in our virtual networking session. I wish there was a way to have like more verbal interaction, but it is what it is. We're learning to navigate these new waters. I hope you had a chance to meet some of your colleagues on the call and are able to start building some connections. One of the things that we really do advocate here is that you all network and collaborate and support each other's projects. You may be offering a service that one of your colleagues does not, and you guys can serve as referrals for one another. So make sure that you're taking advantage of this opportunity to really learn what your colleagues are doing. Most of you on the rental project are going to be folded into the project director calls for our existing Rental 1 cohort. So you'll meet even more of your rental assistance compadres. So that'll be another avenue for you to, meet more of the folks who are doing the work that you are doing as well. So it'll just be more and more ways for you to connect, and, we'll do whatever we can to support that. One of the other things we will be posting in our virtual binder once that is finished is we'll make sure to put up the different projects and their project descriptions. So feel free to reach out as you are going through your projects. So we have reached our conclusion, and we'll open it up for any final questions. Are there any final questions from any of the information that we've discussed today, or anything that we've covered that you want to make sure you get answered before we get off the call?
Nothing in the chat as of yet.
Okay, go ahead, Kim. Sorry. Can you unmute? Yes, go ahead.
Hello, how you doing? I was just
Good,
wondering,
how are
if you
you?
want Time for Change Foundation to introduce ourselves today, or are you doing it over the next 3 days for introduction? Can you just let me know that?
Say that one more time.
Are we doing introductions of everybody today, or are you spreading it out over the next couple of days?
Over the next couple of days.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So those projects who have not spoken today, you will have an opportunity between tomorrow and Wednesday to give us your project summary and tell us all about what you're doing. So if you haven't prepped, get ready, because you don't know if you'll be Tuesday or Wednesday. I do know we'll have 4 projects tomorrow, and then we'll have the final 2 on Wednesday. And I'll also add too, one of the projects that are on this call are Solace Distribution. They are actually in our rental cohort 1, but they joined the orientation just to get the information again. So they will be also sharing and presenting as well, and they are also here to network and all of those good things. So welcome to our Solace. Thank you for joining us. And with that being said, I think we can wrap up for today. Tomorrow, we will have our presentation from Housing First, and we'll talk a little bit more about program responsibilities. And that'll probably be the bulk of what we'll do tomorrow. So looking forward to seeing you back, and have a wonderful afternoon. And we'll see you tomorrow morning, 9:30. I'll open it up around 9:15 or so. Have a good day, everyone.